PC Optimum hacks are some of my favorite messages. Here's another great one.
I went to Shoppers Drug Mart and couldn't resist a few beauty products. So I opened the PC Optimum app, loaded all my offers, and got 20 times the points. That's 30% back.
So smart to turn things you need into things you want. From lipstick and mascara to piling up the points. That's how we make things better. Open your PC Optimum app and load your offers.
The 20 times the points offer runs November 4th to 6th. Exclusive to Shoppers Drug Mart. Restrictions apply. Details in store and in the app.
Uber One member Sarah Silverman here. When people call me for advice, I always say join Uber One for 5% off restaurants and a $0 delivery fee. I also suggest flossing. Join Uber One.
Order minimums apply. Percentage off discounts only available for participating restaurants. See uber.com/Uber1 for details.
All right, good morning, everyone, and welcome to our session number 4, this cold Saturday. I'm glad that you're all here. So before we get started, please take a moment and answer a poll regarding your experience with exercises. If you did not attempt your exercises, you still have a chance to do so and submit it, hopefully. So I hope that you will have time to do that. But regardless, please provide your feedback, whether it was hard or easy, and we're going to start in about 15 seconds. All right, I'm going to end poll. So, and with that, we're going to get started. So today we're going to talk about the following things. We're going to review the application of software in human gene editing. So for those of you who are interested in biomed and combination of biomed and software engineering, you might find it interesting. We're also going to review our conditional statements such as if, elif, and else. We're also going to review of logical operators. And we're going to learn something new today. We're going to learn about lists and loops. So if you guys have any questions about the material that we've covered last time, please make sure you have those questions ready, because today we're going to review it. And if there is any gray area, I'm going to try my best to clarify it, okay? So let's talk about application of software engineering with humans. So Decoder, what it does, it's making gene repairing safer. So CRISP is a technology that allows scientists to edit human genes in order to cure disease. So, however, some gene editing can lead to unintended changes to the DNA. So as you may know that Sometimes people may have diseases because it kind of like runs in their families. So some of those diseases could be based on their genes. So CRISPR is just a technology that will help to kind of like repair your genes, so then you will have lesser chance of getting that disease, or maybe not getting the disease altogether. So a new app, Decoder, uses an algorithm to quickly detect any changes due to the gene editing and give doctors enough time to assess the potential risk of these changes. So this is something pretty exciting, especially for people who might be predisposed to some diseases, and that's pretty good way of avoiding it. So that's just a brief introduction of a combination of biomedical and software engineering. And now we're going to go over our review. So last time we talked about if, elif, else statements. So these are conditional statements. So basically you give a condition. So if mouse Y is lesser than 500, then you will execute this statement. And remember that this statement refers to either true or false. So in this case, it's going to be true. So if mouse Y is less than 500, which means if mouse Y is less than 500 and it's true, then you're going to execute this. But the moment mouse Y is not lesser than 500, if your mouse is not in this location, then it's not going to be executed. And then Python is going to go to the next conditional statement, which would be elif, or else if for short. If mouse X is lesser than 500, then this statement will be executed. So remember, these statements fill 25500 or fill 02550 or fill 00255. These statements will be executed only if one of the statements are true. So this statement, if these two are not true, then else will be executed. And then once Python goes through all these conditional statements and decides whether it's true or not and whatever, then this statement will be executed just like any other normal line of code, okay? Yes, they are Boolean statements because Boolean statements are either true or false. You're correct, yes, yes. So any questions about if, elif, or else statements? Does this make sense? Do you guys understand that if once you give a condition, that this condition must be true in order for the statement inside that condition to be executed? Yes, okay, good. And then can we have two if statements, right? Yes, but if you have if statement and then so let's keep it, let's pay attention to indentation here. So if statement here, and then if you want to have another if statement that relates to the same problem, then you will need to use else if. Okay. Now, if you want to have nested if statement, then you can, and then you can put here if mouse Y lesser than 500, then you're going to execute this, and then you can put inside another if statement. But if you're building conditional statements, for example, for one particular program, then you can use two if statements, but in order for this to be continuous, you will have to use elif statements, because if you use one if statement, it will correspond to one problem, and then if you use another if statement, then you can, but it might be it may not be executed the way how you need it to be. So elif will be the better choice unless you're doing nested statements. Could we say if? Yes, you can. Yes, you can, and both of those must be true. Yes. Yes. Yeah, Tatiana, that was answered to you, and I'm glad that I answered your question. If you do combine the if statements with the logical operation, how do you combine? This is how you combine it. look, if, and then you give your statement mouse, and then this is your logical operator. And that's how you combine it. I hope I answered your question, Luke. I mean, like the end statements. Oh, you just write it here. So for example, if mouse y lesser than 500 or mouse x greater than 500, so you just write it like literally, you just type it all in one line. You just add here. So here you have like here, this is the end of it. But if you want to continue on, you can just say and mouse x or mouse x, let's say like lesser than 500, then you just execute it. So you just continue to type. So here we just give one piece of information, but you can combine it. So you just keep writing. Make sense? Okay, all right. So logical operators review. So remember, when you use and, that means that must be true for all. So for example, here, a 5 greater than 3 and 6 greater than 3, both of these statements must be true in order for the output to be true. Okay, so when you say and, that means that your both statements must be true. When you use or, then you don't care. As long as one of these are true, then it's true. So for example, here you have 5 greater than 3. It is true. But 6 is not lesser than 3. So this one is false. But because you use or, then it doesn't care. So it's going to choose, it's going to give an output as true just because one statement is true. Now, if both statements are false, then the output will be false. Okay. So or doesn't care. As long as one of them is true, it's going to be true. But if both of them are false, then it's going to be false. And then when you use not, it's just an inversion. So when you say that 6 is lesser than 3, then it's false. But because you said not, so not 6 lesser than 3, then it's going to be true. And if you say not 6 lesser than, it actually should be greater. This one should be greater. Yeah. If not 6 greater than 3, then it's going to be false. Okay. So that's how it works. Okay. Yes. You would actually, it depends on your program. Right now, it might be difficult to see, and I can totally understand that, but you in more complex programs, you will actually need sometimes to say it as not, because the logic will make sense that way. It right now, if you can't see the application of it, it's fine, because as long as you understand how it works, then you will understand when you need to apply it. So you may not be able to use it, for example, even today. You might be able to use it for your final project when you have to actually intentionally invert something, and it will make sense. But right now, because we're covering pretty basic material, it might be difficult to see. So I understand where your question coming from, but it really depends on your program. And I must say, in my experience, many times I had to make it intentional. So it will come very obvious once you come across the problem. Okay. Lists. Okay, so before we move on, does anyone have any questions about if-else statements or logical operators? Do you guys understand the difference between or and? Yes, good. Okay, very well. All right, good. Okay, what is a list? So let's take a look at this example. So we have students, okay? We have Henry, Alice, Jack, Alex, and Carrie. So what it is, it's the list of name of students. So these are all the strings that we're going to be storing in this list. And why? Because we're using names and we're using double quotation. So that is string, no questions asked. Now, what is the list? So a list holds multiple values, handy for storing a lot of whatever you want. So it can store your numbers, any numbers, integers, floats, whatever you want. It can store your strings. So that would be either names or just any words that you would like to store. And they're very efficient way of creating and storing a collection of similar values all at once. So the the analogy that I like to use is, imagine it's the folder, okay? So you have a binding folder and you collect your, let's say in your calculus class, if you guys are taking calculus or any math, let's just call it math. You're taking math in school and every week you have quizzes, okay? And then you write, so you're given the paper to write your quiz, so you write your quiz, and then your teacher marks it, and then he gives it back to you. And you have these pieces of paper that you collect every week because you have your quiz every week. So you need to store your quizzes somewhere. So you're gonna put them in a folder. And basically that's gonna be your list. So in Python, the way how you can store multiple values or multiple words or multiple whatever you want, you use a list for that. So just like you would use a folder to store all your quizzes, right? So you open the folder, you put all your quizzes and you put it back, and then every time when you need it, you're going to go back to that folder, you're going to open it and you're going to find your quiz, okay? Same thing with list. So list is just a storage where you're going to store your strings or your values, whatever you want. So before we were covering variables. So you would just create a variable. So would it be an integer or a string? And that variable, that little pocket, will store something for you. So now you kind of went to the next level. So now you're going to have a folder how you can store all your values. So instead of having just like one pocket, now you're going to have the entire folder where you're going to store, or like call it like a suitcase where you're going to store all your stuff. Okay. So how do you make a list? So this square brackets, they're going to tell a computer that you want to make a list. So this is pretty standard all across different programming languages. List can hold any type of data. So it can be numbers, strings, it can be Booleans, for example. And you can, so for example, if you want to create a list of numbers, you're going to name your variable just like you've done before, nothing new here. And then you're going to create, so you're going to assign it. So you're going to use your equal sign. And then you're going to use your square brackets. And these square brackets are going to tell computer immediately that now you're creating a folder where you're going to use all your variables, all your values, sorry. So it will be 101, 02, 303, 44. So now these random numbers are going to store not one number, not two numbers, but 4 numbers. And later on, I'll show you how you can access them. So same thing will apply to your strings. So instead of creating student 1, student 2, student 3, you're just going to create students, and all the students are going to have Henry, Alice, Jack, and Alex. Henry, Alice, Jack, and Alex. Yeah. Okay. So before today's lecture, in order for you to create multiple variables, you would create number 1, like for example, random number 1, random number 2, random number 3, and then you would assign this value to each name of your newly created variable. So that will be a lot of coding, right? And then the same thing with students. If you need to create 4 students, you would probably have to say student 1, Henry, student 2, Alice, student 3, Jack, so on and so forth. But now you have the ability to put them all in one folder. So you just create a folder and you tell your students, okay, get in here. And then you have all your students in one place. So you don't have to create extra lines of code inside a list. So this slide is very, very important, and you're going to have a quick question about that later on. So please pay attention. Get a value from the list by its index. So this is how you're going to access the value that you've put into your list. Now, this is very important. Lists start at index 0. It doesn't start at 1. It always starts at 0. So for example, we've created a list that called my numbers, and you assign all these values to your list. So if you want to get the third value in this list, a third number, that's gonna be not that, so that will not be this number. I'm sorry, that will be not that will be index 2. So it's always whatever number you need to get minus 1, because 101, that will be index 0. Minus 2, it will be 1. 303 will be index 2, and then 44 will be index 3. So if you tell computer that you want to get my numbers index 3, then this value will show up. So whatever human language is, like in terms of numbers, so for example, if you're looking for number 3 here, then in order for you to extract that number from your list, you need to tell Python that it's index 2. So whatever number you're looking for, just like you normally would count, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, if you're telling this to computer, you have to always subtract 1, okay? So if you're looking for the first number in your list, then it's gonna be 0, because 1 minus 1 will be 0. If you're looking for the second number in your list, then it will be indexed 1, because 2 minus 1 will be 1, okay? So just keep that in mind. Index always starts at 0. So your very first number in Python's eyes will be 0. For you, it will be 1, but for Python, it will be 0. And if you're looking for the third number in this case, then Python will need to be told that it's index 2. Otherwise, it's going to give you 44, and that's not what you're looking for example. Any questions about index? It always starts at 0. Okay? All right. So we can use the values in the list similarly to how we used variables. So for example, here we've created a list of numbers, and we're going to use these numbers to draw our ellipse. So in order for us to do that, we're just gonna take our numbers, and then here we're just gonna indicate the index that we're trying to take. And by doing that, we just use our square brackets, and then inside square brackets, we indicate what index we're trying to use. So here we're going to use ellipse. The first parameter will be 75. The second parameter will be 100. The third parameter here will be index 2. So it will be 0, 1, 2. So that will be the number that we'll be using. And the fourth parameter will be using index of 3, and that will be 0, 1, 2, 3. So that's what we'll be using. Now, if you're just using ellipse numbers, that's not going to work. Why? Because Python knows that it's a list of values that it's holding. So if you just tell numbers like, okay, here's the folder, then Python wouldn't know, okay, so you want me to use this folder, but which exactly piece of information you want me to use and how you would like me to use it. So it will not work altogether. It will just give you an error message, and that's it. The program will be terminated. So how can you modify a list? So in order for you to modify a list, all you need to do is to specify which index you need to change. So for example, we've created a list of numbers, and this is how it's going to be displayed. So 0, 1, 2, 3, these are the indices, and each index has its own value. So it's 2, 5, 6, and 8. Now we want to change the very first value at index 0. And we would like to change it from 2 to 3. How do we do that? Well, we need to use the name of our list and then specify the index that we're trying to change, and then just simply assign a new value. That's it. Simple as that. So the trick is, once you use the name of your list, right next to it, you just need to type what index you're trying to change, and then just assign a new value. That's it. Yes. Yes. It would. Yes. Yeah, exactly. Okay, so quick question. What will be the diameter of the ellipse drawn in setup? So remember, the index starts at 0. So here are the operations. So you've got your list of numbers. So this is your list. It holds all these different numbers. okay? So I'm gonna ask this question. What is index 0? Can anyone type me in the chat? What is index 0? What does it equal to? Beautiful. That's it. I'm gonna launch the poll and I'm confident you guys get it right. So index 0 is 20. So then index 1 will be something that is right after that 20. And then we just do operations. Okay, so I'm gonna end the poll in the next 5 seconds. All right, so the correct answer was 100. I'm gonna explain why. It is a tricky question. It is a tricky question. So if you didn't get it right, it's okay. So here's your list, okay? So you have 20, 40, 60, and 80, okay? So starts at 0. This is 1. This is 2. And this is your 3, okay? So these are your indices. Now, the first thing that you're gonna do, you're gonna assign a new value of this index, and that will be your 40. So your 40 is not gonna be 40 anymore. The reason why, because you take your 40 here, and then you add another 10. So after this operation, your 40 is gonna become 50. So this is the new value, 50, okay? And then the next thing you're gonna do, you're gonna take your X at index 3, so that will be your 80. And that's not gonna be 80 anymore, because now you're gonna take your index 1, so it'll be your 50, multiplied by 2, and that will equal to 100. So now your new value for index 3 will be 100. And then in your setup function, you're gonna draw a circle that will have a diameter of 100. So that's because you're going to be using index 3, and that is now equal to 100. Does this make sense? It is a tricky question, because you got to pay attention to a few things here. Okay. All right. That's okay. Don't be hard on yourself. It is a tricky question. So, but you guys had a good start for sure. You figured your indices, so that's a good start. Okay, let's move on to the next one. So making our list bigger. So how can we how can we change our list? So we can add items to an existing list, and let's see how we can make this. So let's just imagine that we're gonna go grocery shopping, and we need to create a list of items that we need to pick up. So we're gonna create our list, and we're gonna not name it as shopping list. And then we're gonna assign a list of strings. So it will be eggs, ham, cheese, onions, whatever you need. And these are the indices of this list, okay? Now, the next thing we're gonna do, we're gonna try to make a change to it. So as we're driving to our grocery store, we realize that, well, we forgot to add a few items that we're gonna need. So that will be milk and bread. And in order for us to do that, we need to use a special function that already is built in Python. So you just need to use dot append. So append, that means that you're gonna add items to the end of your list. And that's how you're gonna do this. So you've created your shopping list, and in order for you to add something to it, you literally press, you type dot append, and then in square brackets, you're gonna indicate exactly what you need to add. And whatever you're adding will go towards the very end of the list. So just like you would write normally a list, like 1, 2, 3, if you need to add something, you clearly are gonna add it at the very end of your list, right? Because there is no space anywhere. So this is exactly how it works. So when you use append, it's gonna be added all the way to the end of your list, okay? Now, if you need to remove something from the list, same deal. You need to use, so this is more intuitive, I think, because remove, it's kind of like remove, and append might be a little bit foreign because you don't use probably append on a daily basis, but remove is something that you probably use all the time. So, so here, in order to remove anything, exactly the same concept. You use dot remove, and then in square brackets, you specify what you need to remove. And then once you remove those two items, so let's say it will be ham and onion, then your list is gonna shrink, okay? So as you can see here, you have your ham here, you have your cheese, onion, milk, and bread, and here you removed your ham and onions, so ham and onions are gone, so now you're gonna have eggs, cheese, milk, and bread. Eggs, cheese, milk, and bread. So whatever you remove, your list is just gonna shrink, okay? Any questions about append and remove? No, good. Okay. So once you went your grocery shopping and you added and removed some items, so sometimes you're gonna need to know, so how many items do I actually need to pick up after making all these changes and speaking with my parents or my siblings, constantly fighting over those items, like what I need to pick up, what I don't need to pick up. Like at the end of the day, you just need to know, okay, how many items do I actually need to pick up? And in order for you to find out, you just need to use a len function. And what len is basically short for length. And len function will give you the number of how many items you have in your list. So the output will be always an integer. It will have to be like a whole number. You can't have 4.5 items in your list. So so here, for example, you have students, and you have all these guys in your list. And now you need to know, okay, how many students do I have on my list? Well, you can create a new variable, such as amount, and you can print len students. So now your amount will equal to 4. And then once you print amount, the output will be 4. You can also avoid this, and you can just say print, and then you can just put this inside your print, and it will just print 4. It will be len students, and that the output will be exactly the same. Here, you just assign this number to this particular variable, but you can avoid that if you don't have to have a variable for that, okay? So len function provides you the number of items that you have on your list. Please take a screenshot of this one and have it somewhere handy. So these are the common list methods. So method is just something that allows you to make, to alter your list or provide some information about your list. So for example, append, that's what we talked about. We're going to add an item to the end of the list. Remove will remove the first item whose value is equal to the item. And then len will provide you the length of your list. Index just returns the index of the first item whose value is equal to the item. So for example, if you say index and then you say x, then the output will be 0 because the index of x is 0. Okay. And then sort. So sort will just sort the items of the list in place from the lowest value to the highest value. So for example, if you have a variety of different numbers, then you can sort them and it will be like in increasing order, for example. So it will be like 0, 5, 10, 13, so on and so forth. And the reverse is just reverse the elements of the list in place. So these may not be so intuitive at the moment, but once you come across certain problems, you will know exactly what you need to use. So just as long as you understand the concept and what it does, this method, then it's good. So if you can't see the application of it yet, it's fine, but you just need to make sure that you understand what each method does. Okay. And here's your very first exercise. So I'm going to provide you a piece of code to make sure that you guys have more time to work on your code. So I'm going to share it in the, just give me a second. I'm going to share it in the chat. And so this is your first exercise. So here you need to use a list to draw 4 rectangulars that all grow with your mouse X. So you need to use a list that should store values that are different for each bar. So you need to think about which argument initializing rectangular should be included in your list. And then X is the same for all bars. Width is determined by the mouse coordinate. So clearly it has to be dependent to your mouse X, okay? And height is exactly the same for all bars. So you need to use mouse X here. Now I'm going to provide you the first couple lines of your code. So here you already have your while list and you have already your setup function. So now when you guys go back to your breakout rooms, you will need to work on your draw function where you need to use a magic keyword. And we talked about it last time and the time before, and I'm not going to say it, because you have your variable. That's okay. Welcome. That's okay. If you're late, that's fine. So you will need to use your while list inside your draw function. So you will need to use some magic keyword in order to be allowed to use that. And you guys know what it is. And then you're going to draw your rectangular form. How many times do you need to draw your rectangular form inside the draw function? Can anyone tell me in the chat? Four. Good. Yes. Okay. I was a bit worried for a second. Yes, 4, please. 4 rectangular shapes inside your draw function. And you need to use your mouse X and whatever while list is, but you need to do a little trick inside your draw function in order to be able to use while list. And you guys all know that. So with that, you will be sent to your breakout rooms. So please make sure you ask your question of your mentor. They're there to help you and support you. And you guys will be back in about 7 minutes or so. All right, welcome back. I hope you guys had a productive time in your breakout rooms and you were able to either finish exercise or get pretty far with it. So this exercise was fairly short, and I'm going to go over the solutions and I will share the solution in the chat. So we have our while list, so that's what I shared before, and then we have our setup function, so nothing new there. And then inside draw function, So that magic keyword that I was referring to, that was a global while list. So that's what, in order for you to use this while list, you would use global here. And then you create your background. So whatever you want, any colors. So here it will be yellow, but if you want to get creative, you're welcome. And then we're gonna use our fill function, and we're gonna draw our 4 rectangular forms. So the first one will start, so all your rectangular shapes are gonna start at 0, okay? And then the next thing, they will be dependent on your while list and your mouse X, and then you can just use 30 if you want. So hence, every time when I move my mouse in the X direction, so horizontally, then all these bars are going to be changing accordingly. Why? Because we have mouse X here. So it is dependent on that. And the location of these rectangular shapes are dependent on our while list that we've specified over here. So it will be while list 0, 1, 2, 3. Okay. So, and then at the end, of course, we need to use run. So that was the trick in this exercise. So you just use, instead of creating variable for each rectangular shape, we wanted you to use while list and different indices. So that way you are becoming more comfortable using different values that you're storing inside your list, okay? So that was the trick. I'm gonna share this entire code, and yes, it will still work in this case, but again, like the reason why we want you to use the global here is because we want you to become comfortable and basically understand the concept behind it. So it will work, but it's better to use global so that way you're more consistent with your code. It's more correct, because sometimes in coding, some things will still work at some level, but it doesn't necessarily mean this is the correct way of doing things. So I would say that stick to the classics. So, but yes, it will still work. Okay, so share the code. If there are any questions, fire them in the chat, and we are gonna move on with our loops. So the reason why we're going to be covering loops is because this is another way how we're going to make our code more efficient. So if you see how the code that I shared, that you basically had to create rectangular shape 4 times. So you had to type something 4 times. And I'm sure that some of you are wondering, well, it must be a more efficient way of creating those rectangular shapes, because if I need to create 4 rectangular shapes, I have to type it 4 times, which is fine, whatever. But imagine if you had to create 1,000 rectangular shapes. So does it mean that you have to type rect 0 while list something mouse X 30,000 times? That's going to be a lot of typing, or a lot of copy and paste, right? So it's not the most efficient. So loops are to the rescue. So what are the loops? Loops repeat code a certain number of times. So that would be something that you would want to use for your very first exercise that you just finished. So loops are great for working with lists. And today we'll learn the most common type of loops, which is called for loops, okay? So usually what happens, you have start of your loop, and then you have some code that you have to execute it, and then you have end of loop. So let's think about loop analogy. So some of you, I'm sure most of you have been to dentist, and some of you may not like dentists. I personally don't like them very much. But that's not about dentist. It's about what dentist does. So dentist begins at the very first tooth, and then they check if your tooth is healthy. And then once it's healthy, it's going to move on to the next tooth. And then they're going to check your next tooth, make sure it's healthy or whatever happens to that tooth. And then they're going to repeat the same thing as long as they find the next tooth in your mouth, right? So there are like 32 teeth. So they're going to be doing this 32 times, okay? And then they basically repeat this routine until they check all your teeth. Now, how can you combine loops with your lists? So you can go through each item in the list and print each value using a for loop. So let's go back to our shopping list for a moment. So in shopping list, we've got 4 items. We're going to stick with our eggs, ham, cheese, and onions. And then we're going to create our for loop. So this is the anatomy of our for loop. So we're going to start with 4. So that's the indication what kind of loop we're going to be using. So that's the for loop. And then we're going to use a keyword item. So when you use keyword item, Python immediately knows that it needs to go to your list and go through each item. So even though you haven't specifically defined item, it's something that's already embedded in Python. So when you use item, Python knows immediately that you're referring to items that are inside your shopping list. And then here you just say where, so in, and then you specify which list you want Python to work with. So in this case, it will be shopping list. An item will refer to each item inside your shopping list. And here you just write your code, whatever you need to do. And then in this case, we're going to use print function. So when we say for item, eggs, cheese, ham, onion, whatever, it's going to print each item inside this shopping list. Okay, so first it will be eggs, and then it will be ham, and it will be cheese, and it will be onions. And the loop is going to go 4 times. So it's going to be first round of loop, second round of loop, third round of loop, fourth round of loop. Okay, so for loop is a finite loop that will go over either items in your list or certain type of operation, as long as you specify it. So in this case, you specified the length of your list. So the length of your list is 4, and it's going to print your items as many items as your shopping list contains. Okay, so here's the quick question. So what will we print with this piece of code? So you have your numbers. So you have your list of numbers, which is 2, 3, 5, whatever. And then you have your X, your new variables that you defined here, and it's going to equal to 0. Now we're going to go to our for loop, and we're going to go for number in numbers. So again, number here is identical as item. So you can specify whatever you want, but it will know that when you say something in list, it will know that number, that means that you're referring to this number. And another way of thinking about it is you can basically use any word here. You can use A, you can use B, you can use item, you can use number, but you also want to make this variable meaningful. So then you know, because it makes sense, right? So it will make it more clear for you what are you trying to do with this for loop. So here it's pretty clear that for number in numbers. So you're doing a for loop, you're doing some counting or iteration inside this for loop, and you're referring to number in a list of numbers. So it's easy to understand that way, but you can call it anything you want. And here you have X, so that's your variable that you defined here, and then you're adding your number into your X, and then after you've done that, you're going to print the result of your X. Okay, so pay attention to indentation here. What's happening inside your for loop, and then what's happening outside of your for loop. Because see, indentation, the way how things are indented here is very clear that print is happening after for loop is executed. Okay, so I'm going to launch poll. Give me a second. Oh, there you go. Sorry. Question 2. Let's go. All right, 5 more seconds. Okay, last chance for anyone who hasn't input their answer yet. Okay, I'm gonna end poll in 3, 2, 1. Okay, good results. So congratulations to everyone who got it right. The correct answer was 10. Yes, it was 10. So if you didn't get it right, don't worry about it because I'm gonna explain it again. So here we have list of numbers. We have our new variable. Now inside for loop, what we're gonna be doing is we're gonna be doing the following. So x equals to 0. So when we enter a for loop, our x equals to 0. Oh, sorry. Okay. How do I do this? Okay. So it equals to 0 the moment we enter for loop. Now inside the for loop, we're gonna add a number. And the first number that we're gonna add is gonna be 2. So now x equals to 2, okay? And then because we have our next number here, so then we're gonna do our second iteration and we're gonna add to our 2, 3. So plus 3. Actually, I should be doing it differently. So let's see. You have x equals to 0, and then you add 2, and then you add 3, and then you go to your next iteration, and that will be the last one, and then it will be 5, and then there are no other numbers. That's it. The square bracket ends here. So then Python will exit this for loop and will print x that will equal to 10. That's it. So that is why the answer is 10, because you iterate through each number until you finish iterating through your entire list. So you have to do it only 3 times because you have only 3 numbers here. And you add all these numbers to your x that initially equals to 0. And your result will be just a sum of all these numbers. Okay? Any questions about that? Yes, that's not a problem. The session is being recorded, so it will be posted, I believe, on YouTube or a website later today. So that's totally fine. If you have to leave early, that's okay. Okay, so when to use loops. So let's take a look at our code from exercise 1. So remember how you had to create 4 different rectangulars? Well, it's long and it's repetitive. And as I mentioned before, what if you had 20 values or 1,000 values? So that will be a lot of values. So in order to make this code more concise and more efficient, so then you can dictate how many times you need to draw your rectangular shapes, you can just use a for loop. And here you will use your while list, just like we've used before. And then you're going to create your for loop. And then here you just specify y or whatever you want. So here we're going to use y in where y list. And then you just type rectangular form 0, and then you use your y, mouse x, and 30. And all these guys are going to be drawn and printed, just like you've done it manually. So instead of having 4 lines of code, now you're down to 2. And if you need to increase the amount of your rectangular shapes, you can just add more numbers to your while list, and then more shapes are going to be drawn. So you don't even need to make a change to your for loop. You just need to add more numbers to your while list, okay? And so this is the changing repetition into loops. So here you have, for example, you start with y at index 0, so it'll be 50, and then your first rectangular shape is going to be 0, 50, mouse x, and 30. The next one is going to be your y 135, so then your rectangular shape will be printed here, and Just give me a second. And then you're gonna go to your next y in your while list will be 275, and the next one will be 400. So that's that, and then you're done looping. So you will be looping as long as your while list contains numbers. So once it hits the last number, that's it. The while loop is terminated and the program is finished. So here's your second exercise. So you're going to use a list and a for loop to draw 5 circles falling down the screen at the same time. You need to think about how a loop helps us draw the circles so much faster. So here, I will share with you the first piece of the code to make it easier for you guys. So here, you need to think about for each circle, the center, the X position is different. And you need to think about a way to store multiple X positions. And then you need to repeat the process for the number of circles using a for loop. So I've given you already variables. So now you just need to use your draw function. And inside your draw function, you will need to make some manipulations with your Y position and your Y speed. And then you will create your for loop. And you need to iterate your for loop through a list. And I'm not going to tell you which list, because if you look at the code, it will be pretty straightforward. And then you use your X and Y position to draw your ellipse. Okay, so you just need to work on your draw function. And you need to do some manipulations with your Y position and Y speed. And then you create your for loop, and you need to iterate your for loop through a list. And the variables that I've given you, there is only one list. Okay, so I'm not going to say anything more. You guys are going to go to your breakout rooms for about 8 minutes or so. And if there are any questions or concerns, please reach out to your mentor, and they're there to support you. So with that, you guys are free to go to the breakout rooms. Welcome back. I hope you guys had a good productive time in your breakout rooms and you were able to get ahead with this exercise or hopefully even finish that. So if not to worry, because I will be going through the solution. So I shared the code with you. So we started with our X position, Y position, and Y speed. And X position is our list that contains all these different numbers that we'll need. And then Y position and Y speed is just, these are just variables that we'll have to manipulate in order to get our circles to move. So setup function is pretty straightforward. And then the draw function, that's where the real fun begins. So we brought our X position, Y position, and Y speed, created our background, fill, whatever. And now we'll be manipulating our Y position with Y speed, and we will be changing our Y speed by incrementing it by 0.5. So now the trick is to create a for loop that will be iterating through our X position. So that is this list. And then as we're iterating through our X position, we're going to be drawing our ellipse, and it will be moving it will be falling down just like we want to, because we've indicated how we're going to be changing it, right? So our Y position will be incremented by Y speed, and our Y speed will be incremented by 0.5. So when I click run, you see all the circles are moving down, and there are 5 circles. Why? Because we have 5 items in X position, and the loop will be repeated 5 times. So 5 times we're going to draw different circles, and that is how it looks like. Okay, so I will be sharing this code in a chat. And we're going to move on to our next topic. So how can we mix for loops and if statements? Well, it's not as hard as it might look like. So you can put if statements and other logic blocks inside for loops. So for example, here we'll be iterating through X position. So just like what we've done with our exercise. And then we're going to create a condition inside our iteration is if X is greater than 150, then we execute the statement. And or any other. So if this is true, we're going to execute it. If it's not true, then we're going to execute everything yellow. And then we're going to draw our ellipse. So as you can see here, that if X is greater than 150, then we're just going to fill it. And then if it's not, then we're going to fill it with yellow. And hence, you can see how we've got 3 yellow circles, and the remainder of them are just red. So this is the way how you can use if statements. So basically, conditional statement will come into play when you need to distinguish. For example, you need to create like a different shape, or maybe color that shape in a different shade. So that's when you would use if statement. But as you can see, you also need to pay attention to IDentation, because if you put everything on the same line, you're going to get an error. So please pay attention that there is a space in between, because if statement will be executed inside for loop, and everything that's happening inside for loop will have to be indented to the right. And again, whatever is happening inside if statement will also have to be indented to the right. So you will have to have a space in between, and that's how Python will know the order of the execution, because if you miss that space, you're going to get an error message and it will not run. So sometimes it could be pretty frustrating, as your code makes sense, it's right, it's logical, but it doesn't work, and most of the times it's because you're missing that space. So now we're entering a zone where we're going to have multiple things combined into one. So having that space, indenting things properly is extremely important. So please pay attention to that. And now here, so let's look into this example a little bit more. So we've got our X position with different numbers, and as we're moving through our for loop, as we're going through iteration. So first we're going to go with X, and I moved too quick. So for example, the first one will be 40, and then we're going to check for this condition and see if X is greater than 150. And then if it is a yes, then we're going to execute it. If it is a no, then we're going to go for else. And the next one will be 80. So again, we're comparing, is it greater than 150? No, it's not. So we're going to execute this statement, and we're going to draw our ellipse. And the next one, we're going to check for 120, 160, and 200. So as you can see, the for loop will run as long as there are X's inside our list X position. And as it's running through all these numbers, it will be checking for this condition. If X is greater than 150, then a certain code will be executed. If not, then you will see a different color. So you can see that only two circles will be drawn as red, because only 2 circles will meet that condition, and every other circle, so the first 3 will be executed under else, and the ellipse will be drawn being filled with yellow color. So any questions about how you combine for and if statements? Oops. Okay, no questions. So looks like it makes sense. So I'm gonna go over the exercises you guys will need to do since we have a bit of time. So with the exercises for bug busters, so the first exercise, it might seem a little bit complicated, but basically what you need to do, you need to create about 9 different circles. And that means that you need to create a list of 9 numbers in increasing order. So you can start, let's say, 50, 100, 150, 200, 250, so on and so forth. And that list will help you draw each circle with a different diameter. Now, so you create, so let's call it diameters list. So you can create diameter list containing 9 different numbers in increasing order. And inside your draw function, you're going to use those diameters in the for loop. And as you're iterating through those diameters, you will be drawing ellipse. Now, your ellipse or your circles will be dependent on your mouse. So as you can see that as you're moving your mouse, all those 9 circles are moving along with that. So what that means that you will need to use mouse X and mouse Y as one of your variables inside your ellipse. And then the other 2 variables that you will be using inside your ellipse will be dependent on that list of diameters that you've created in the beginning, because you need to draw 9 circles all at once. So that means that you will probably need to use those diameters as you're iterating through them. So this is something very similar that we have worked on an exercise 2. Very similar concept, very similar. Okay, so you just need to draw one shape, but multiple times. It also, you can go back to exercise 1. It's the same concept. By using for loop, you're just shrinking the amount of code that you have to write. So in exercise 1, you had to write, you had to draw your rectangular shape 4 times. If you use the same concept for this exercise, you're gonna draw your ellipse 9 times, I guess. But if you use for loop, you basically have to type it once, and your for loop will be executed as many times as how many numbers your diameter list contains. So in this case, you should have at least 9 because there are 9 circles there. So I hope that makes sense. And then with your second exercise, you will need to create, so here's the trick here. So you will need to go back to your mouse pressed, because as you can see that circles will appear every time when you press your mouse. So you will need to use that. And then you will also need to create a list, and that list will be changing every time when you press your mouse. So the function that you will need to use, or the method that you will need to use, is append. So once you create your ellipse, your list, and let's call it ellipse Y, for example. So you're going to start with a variable, let's say 250. And then every time when you press your mouse, you will need to add to that list. So I hope it makes sense. So if mouse pressed, then every time when you press the mouse, then your list will have to increase. So you have to use dot append. And then again, what you're pressing mouse, and then in which direction are you trying to increase the amount of circles that are being drawn on the screen. So it will be vertically. So it will be mouse Y, okay? So I think that's enough hints for this one. Now let's, it looks like my, oh wow, great. Sorry, my Firefox just crashing on me. That's fantastic. Okay, sorry about that. I will have to share the screen again. I apologize for that. Sorry, guys. Just give me a second. Oh, looks like it's reloading. Share screen. All right, with Pythonic Lava. So with Pythonic Lava, you guys will need to, again, create a list. And as you can see, whatever change you need to create, that will be happening in an X direction. So again, your change will be dependent on your mouse. So the direction will be horizontal, so it will be mouse X. So that's what will be driving your change. Now, so you create your list first of different variables in increasing order. And that list, inside your for loop, you will be iterating through that list. And then the condition will be based on your mouse X. So if your mouse X is either bigger or smaller certain value, then you're going to draw the amount of squares. Okay, so that's the trick. And then here, you just use text in order to write loading, like text size and text. So we've covered it, I believe, in session 2 and session 3 as well. Here you use your condition. If mouse X is bigger than certain value, then you're going to draw all the shapes, and then if it's smaller, then the shapes will be decreasing. So you have your for loop and you have your condition here. And remember, it's dependent on mouse X. Now, with your exercise 4 here, you have, again, your for loops. So I suggest that you start working on your first exercise here, and then you can build on this exercise in order to solve your second exercise, second problem. Because your second exercise here will be dependent on 2 conditions. So if mouse X is bigger than certain number, and it has to be smaller than other number, then you will draw as a certain, so you will draw a certain shape. So as you can see that it's enlarges, or else nothing will happen. So you will have to have your for loop, and then inside of your for loop, you will have if-else statement. And your condition will be dependent on mouse X. And I think that's it. So we have 3 more minutes. So if you guys have any questions, you're welcome to ask. And in the meantime, I will launch the poll for the end of the session. So please take a moment and answer those questions. And if you have any questions related to the material or exercises, please feel free to ask. And I don't see any questions. So thank you very much for attending this session today. I hope you guys learned lots. If there are any questions or concerns or something doesn't make sense, please reach out to your mentors. They're there to help you and support you. And you are free to go once you answer the poll. And I hope you enjoy weather outside. I know it doesn't seem very enjoyable, but you know, the weather is good as what we make out of it. So yeah, so thank you guys, and I hope you have a great weekend.